Hi, my name is Kris Kelso. I'm a professional keynote speaker, an entrepreneur, and I'm the author of Overcoming the Impostor, Silence Your Inner Critic, and Lead with Confidence. And to me, happiness, a simple form of happiness, is a nice bowl of dark chocolate peanut M&Ms.
Ooh, dark chocolate peanut M&Ms. You didn't
Yes.
mention that in your book, Kris. I'm kind of disappointed.
No,
I didn't
you're
get any
right.
of those. What the heck, man? But
Mm.
no, so tell me about that simple joy. Why is that happiness for you, my friend?
Man, well, it's a combination of a couple things. I have a milk allergy, so milk chocolate sometimes bothers my throat. And of course, as a professional speaker, anything that messes with my voice and throat is something I gotta stay away from. So try to be careful with that. But I love dark chocolate, and when I discovered that M&Ms made a dark chocolate peanut, it's just the perfect combination. I love them.
Ooh, that sounds yummy. I'll have to find some here. That sounds really good. So, Kris, but as a keynote speaker, when you started out, did anybody just hand you a bowl of regular peanut M&Ms and say, "Here you go," and you ate them, or did you always hold
I
yourself back?
I try to be careful with those because they will mess me up if I get too much milk in my throat. It actually messes with my voice, gives me trouble.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow. Well, that's good because a lot of people who face imposter syndrome will just make people happy and just do what they offer them.
right.
So I'm pretty glad that you didn't do that. And I have to tell you, I'm really glad you wrote this book because I've talked about imposter syndrome before, but never quite the way that you do in the book. So tell
Mm.
me, who is the imposter and why is it important that we silence that inner critic?
Yeah, well, so when I learned about imposter syndrome years ago, after more than a decade of being an entrepreneur and really figuring it out as I went, and a lot of experimenting and making things up as I went, and I I had been plagued by this nagging self-doubt, this fear that one day people are going to figure out that I don't know what I'm doing. And I learned about this, that psychologists have given a name to that. It's called imposter syndrome. And it's the fear that, that your success isn't real, that what other people see in you isn't legitimate. And it was a big weight lifted off my shoulders when I learned about it. But then I started to study and dig in to what was going on, the psychological mind game that goes on when you're wrestling with imposter syndrome. And your question, who is the imposter? You know, I started to call that voice of the inner critic, that voice that many of us have in the back of our head that says, "Don't try that. Don't take that risk. Don't let anyone know. Fake it till you make it. Pretend you have it all together." That voice that tries to convince you that your success isn't real. I named that voice the imposter. Not just because it's trying to convince me that I'm an imposter, which it often is, but really it's to remind me that that voice itself isn't real. There's nobody there. It is a fake. I'm not the fake. That voice is the fake.
I like that. So with that whole name it so you can claim it, I think plays in a space here. If we can kind of
Mm,
point at that fakeness and say, listen, imposter, that's
yeah.
not real. That's not the truth. This is not what I've experienced. Maybe I don't know where I'm going, but I know that I've been somewhere like this before and I'm comfortable. Is that explaining a little bit of your imposter there, Kris?
Yeah, I think that calling it out and recognizing it. No, number one, when I talk to people about imposter syndrome, especially those that have not heard of it or they maybe have heard the term but didn't really understand what it was, when I unpack it for them, 90% of the time the response I get is, "Oh my goodness, that's me. I thought I was the only one. Thank you." And it's so helpful to know that other people wrestle with that I'm not the only one, that I'm not struggling alone, and that there are some tactics and strategies to deal with it. So I often say that knowing is half the battle, to quote, the old GI Joe cartoon from
G.I.
the 80s.
Joe!
Yes, knowing is half the battle. But then once you know, you can start to identify when that voice is creeping up. And I hear from people all the time who will say, "Kris, Now that I'm aware, I see it happening, I hear it, and I know that, oh, that's the voice of the imposter. That's that inner critic that's trying to convince me to step back and recoil in fear when I need to push forward and lean into the discomfort. And so recognizing it does really help you to identify, name it, and then you can deal with it. When you know what it is you're wrestling against, you can address it properly in the moment.
Yeah. So you know who the enemy is, and it's not us, but it is inside
Right.
of us.
Yeah. It's
I
not
think
us, and it's not the people around us who appear very successful and may intimidate us or make us feel like, unintentionally make us feel inferior. They're not doing that on purpose. It's a mind game that's going on inside of our own head. So we can sort of pull away from the fear of other people. We can step back from that intimidation factor and recognize, man, many times those people are available to help, and there are things we can learn from them if we lean into those relationships rather than recoiling back.
That's good. That's good. Well, let's talk about some of the stuff that came with writing the book before we go into the book. And that is, you had someone say, this book is not going to sell a single copy. Nobody
Yes.
suffers from this. And Kris, I'm going to raise both hands and say, I suffer from this. So talk
Yeah.
to me about that, man, and how you overcame that, because that's a big one.
Boy, so the book is written largely to and about entrepreneurs. Now, I just got a text message this morning from someone who is not an entrepreneur, has never been an entrepreneur. And he said to me, Kris, your book has been so powerful. It helped me realize that I really am an entrepreneur. My life is my business, and I'm running my life and trying to figure this out. And I'm riding the lion, which is a metaphor from the book. And the lion in my life is my life. And so a lot of non-entrepreneurs have really resonated with this, but it's written a lot about entrepreneurship. And as I was in the process of writing the book, I was talking to a lot of different people, and many entrepreneurs that I interviewed were very helpful and gave me lots of insight. But there was one particular guy that, as you noted, he when I explained the sort of the problem to him, he said, entrepreneurs are bold, risk takers. They're courageous. They're brave. Entrepreneurs don't have self-doubt. Like, they're the bravest people in the world. This is crazy. He said, I don't think anyone's going to buy this book. And, I just thanked him for his feedback. I said, I appreciate you being honest with me. And, I didn't try to argue with him very much, though I was sitting on a mountain of evidence. I had, dozens and dozens of studies and hundreds of interviews that I'd done with entrepreneurs that said otherwise. But I just said, thank you very much. And, kind of wrapped up the conversation. And then I wrote that story in the book. So didn't name the guy. I try to be, I'm not trying to call anybody out or be mean, but it was an example of, for a brief moment, I had to say, oh my goodness, I had that voice kind of creep up and say, maybe you've got this all wrong. Maybe you're about to publish this book and expose your own vulnerability and weaknesses and be really, open and vulnerable with people. And if nobody reads it, if nobody buys it, if nobody identifies with it, you're going to look like a fool. And so I had to use some of my own tactics. Fortunately, I was near the end of the book. I had worked on this for 3 years. I had a lot of strategies to dealing with that voice of self-doubt, but it was just another example of, we all have those moments where we sort of have a brief moment of panic and say, oh my goodness, have I got it all wrong? And am I going to be exposed here? And I was able to push through that very quickly and say, no, I know this is going to be really, really valuable information when it gets into the world.
Absolutely. It's very valuable. And with that, I got to ask, did you send him a copy of your book, Kris?
No, I did not. I'm just not really a vindictive sort of rub it in your face kind of guy. So I didn't send him anything. If he comes across it, great. If we ever run into each other again, I'll be nice to the guy and I'll tell him some of what I've learned since our conversation. But it's not my style to try to stick it to somebody like that.
Well, I don't see it as sticking it to him. Having read your book, I would argue that perhaps he was suffering from some of that overconfidence bravado, not really sticking it to him, but perhaps saying, if you can get past the fact that you think that imposter syndrome isn't real, perhaps you could resonate with some of the stories inside the book that might make sense
Yeah.
for you. I wasn't suggesting being vindictive at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I get it. I think, you know, in hindsight, when I think about that particular conversation, what concerns me more than maybe him struggling with imposter syndrome is that he's probably created an environment in his company where it's not okay to admit a weakness. Because when I talk to business leaders and they say, yeah, that's not an issue in our organization, my rebuttal to that is, well, statistically, 70 to 80% of people wrestle with imposter syndrome at some point in their career, and it tends to be more prevalent among high achievers. So if you have a high achieving, grade A staff, it's almost a guarantee that somewhere, someone, and probably many people are wrestling with some self-doubt. So if no one's talking about it in the organization, if there's no sort of outward signs of it, then that may be a signal that your culture doesn't allow that kind of vulnerability, that people are suffering in silence and they're unwilling, or they're fearful of speaking out about a doubt or a fear or a self-consciousness. So I think in those cases, the leader needs to step up and say, hey, this is something we need to address. This is something we need to be talking about. And I want people to be able to open up and say, I'm not sure that I'm not in over my head a little bit here, or I'm struggling with something and I need to get some help. But the only way to get that help is to admit that I need help. Because if you don't have that in your company culture, then there's a lot of problems going on under the surface. There's a lot of issues that aren't being addressed that could put you at risk.
Yeah, I see it as leaders have to go first in identifying their own imposter syndrome, right? You have to share your shit before anybody else is going to share their shine. So super, super tough. So let's talk a little bit more about the book here, because you've got so much in here. One of the things that resonate with me, I'm looking here at page 50. It says productive procrastination, working hard on the things that are easy in order to avoid the things you don't want to do. And I got to tell you, I suffer from that one too. So this book kind of called me out here, Kris. So talk to me about productive procrastination.
Oh man, I have to admit, it's a trap I fall into on a regular basis as well. I have to be vigilant to watch out for it. So productive procrastination is when you are avoiding something difficult or uncomfortable. And the way you avoid it is find lots of easy things to do to feel productive. So examples might be, what you need to be doing is reaching out to that really big client, or submitting a proposal to that really big opportunity, or following up with, someone that's waiting for you, but a conversation that might be uncomfortable. And instead you're updating your website, and you're going through old emails, and you're, cleaning your office, and you're doing things that aren't not themselves inherently wrong or bad. But if they're an excuse to feel busy, but not do the hard thing, then they are bad in the sense that they're holding you back. So they become this intentional distraction to try to appease that mind so that you can get to the end of the day and go, well, I didn't have time to get to that thing, but look at all the other stuff I did. When in actuality, all that other stuff may not matter near as much as the one thing you put off.
Yeah. Well, I'm called out. I got work to do. Thank you, Kris. That's good stuff. So let's take a quick break here. We're going to play happy or crappy. So I'm going to name some things that make some people happy, make some people feel crappy, and then we're going to move into the rest of the book. So we already talked about chocolate. So dark chocolate is happy, right?
Dark chocolate is happy.
Happy. Good. So bacon.
Oh, very happy.
Coffee.
Coffee, happy. Yes. Like some coffee. Try not to overdo it on the caffeine, but I like some coffee.
There you go. Ice cream.
Ice cream is mostly happy. So interestingly, that same milk allergy I mentioned, I can have good quality ice cream. I can't have cheap ice cream. So I've noticed the cheap ice cream will really mess with my throat, probably because it's more milk than cream. It's a little on the cheaper end, but a good quality ice cream doesn't seem to bother me. So really good ice cream makes me very happy. There
you go. Well, you have to come to Ohio. You'll have some graders. We've got great ice cream here. So
yeah, that sounds awesome.
Awesome. So So audiobooks.
Yeah. Audiobooks are happy. I enjoy an audiobook. I probably don't do as many as I should. I like to read physically, and you can take more notes and pause and reread a little easier with a physical book. But man, to consume stuff in the car or while exercising, to be able to sort of double your productivity, audiobooks are great. And I will say, I really enjoyed recording my audiobook. That was a lot of fun.
Ooh, very nice. So it's your voice, which is awesome.
It is in my voice.
Love that. Love that. So last one, riding in the back seat of a car.
Yeah, not so much. I don't know
So
that I
that's
would call
crappy?
it crappy, but it's not.
Well, it can either be
not
happy or crappy, Chris.
Okay, well then it's crappy. I don't like it.
All right, we got some crappy out of you. Good job, Chris. You win the prize for today, which is more questions about your book. Hooray!
Okay, hurrah!
Yay!
I love it.
Yeah.
My favorite thing.
Me
How'd
too.
you know?
So I don't know. So with that, friends, as you're listening, hopefully you're enjoying this conversation. I encourage you, when we're done, go to overcomingtheimpostor.com with an OR or an ER. Chris owns both of them. Impostor, impostor.com, overcomingtheimpostor.com. We're going to talk about this free chapter just a little bit here because it's one of the meaty ones. I have to say, it's pretty impressive. He's not giving away just the introduction. He's giving away a great chapter of the book. So let's talk about this. Tour guide is something I've always thought is something good to be. But no. You explained that really we want to be an explorer. And I have to tell you, until I got to that chapter, you write, never stop exploring. And I'm like,
yes.
What? I'm looking at the cover of the book. I'm like, I don't get it, Chris. So tell me, tour guide or explorer, help us out here that for the chapter you're giving away.
So as I studied imposter syndrome and people's response to it, how they dealt with that inner critic, I started to notice two different approaches. And I eventually I named them the tour guide and the explorer. And with no offense to all the tour guides out there, by the way, sidebar, I once got invited to speak at a conference for tour operators. And I did speak at the event, and I was just about getting ready, and I realized, oh no, my metaphor says tour guide bad, explorer good, and so I had to shift some things up a little bit because obviously there are great tour guides out there, but in terms of thinking about leadership, I use these two styles as examples of how people wrestle with self-doubt and the unknown in particular. So tour guides tend to stay in their comfort zone. They tend to follow a script, make the same basic loop over and over again. They stay on the tour and they take people where they've been before many, many times and where they are the expert. So they deal with imposter syndrome by staying away from any area where they don't feel certain. They stay in their expertise. They stay in their sweet spot. And so tour guides don't ask questions, they answer questions. And if they do ask questions, they're often asking just so that they can demonstrate what they know, or they ask in order to teach. But anything that is outside of that comfort zone, they just sort of pretend those areas don't exist. That's not on the tour. And if a topic comes up that's not in their domain of expertise, well, they'll steer the conversation back to where they are the expert. On the other hand, the other approach to dealing with the imposter is not to avoid it like that, but really to disarm it. And I call this approach the explorer because explorers are very comfortable with the unknown. In fact, they get excited about the new learning that comes from exploring some area that they haven't been before. And explorers are glad to have other experts around. They welcome people on the journey to say, who can add value as we go out and learn and explore? And really importantly, the explorer mindset knows that sometimes you go a certain direction and you realize it's not going to get you where you want to go, and you have to turn around and double back. And they see that hitting a dead end and doubling back, not as failure, but as learning. It's part of the exploration process. And so a big mindset shift that I talk about in several chapters of the book is this idea that you reframe failure as learning and you see every failure as an opportunity to gain something. which means you no longer fear failure. You actually anticipate it and look forward to getting something out of it. You learn that failure is not the opposite of success. It's actually success and failure are intertwined. It's a critical part of the process of learning and growing into success. And so the explorer will be glad to say, hey, I don't know the answer here. Let's go figure it out. Let's dive in. Let's go after it. Hey, there's something new and unknown. I want to be the first one there, and I want to bring people with me, and I want to leverage the expertise of people around me rather than trying to stay in my comfort zone and avoid that voice of the inner critic. The explorer just disarms it by saying, fear of failure doesn't hold anything on me. I'm not worried about not being the expert. I'm not worried about not having all the answers. I want to go to the place where I don't have all the answers.
Wow. Well, when I hear that, and when I read that in the book, the tour guide was definitely me. Definitely me when I was in college, when I started out. And I'm thankful to have overcome that and become much more the explorer and much more comfortable. But it takes time. It's natural to be in that state initially, to just reflect or rather deflect all the questions to someone else. So with that, Kris, let's talk, let's go deeper on just one more here. The title of this episode is all about humble confidence, right? Moving from proud insecurity to humble confidence. So first, and by the way, friends, that starts on page 128 of Kris's book. So let's talk about that humble confidence. What does that mean to you?
Well, I'll start with the opposite of that, which is proud insecurity. I noticed that when I was wrestling with imposter syndrome early in my career, especially, but even at different times in my career, I would fall into this state where I was being outwardly very, you might say confident or even arrogant, like trying to project this confidence and this assurance that I know what I'm doing. And it was an attempt to mask an inward insecurity. I was so afraid of being found out that I was trying to act like I had it all together. And so I named that state proud insecurity. It's this sort of outward pride masking an inward insecurity. And as I started digging into that and looking at the behavior, I said, well, what's the opposite of that? Well, the opposite of proud insecurity would be humble confidence. And it was this epiphany moment that humility and confidence are not opposites, that they actually can go well together, and that you can be confident and humble at the same time. One of my favorite quotes on humility is from C.S. Lewis, the author. He said, humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. And imposter syndrome in many ways is this obsession with, what do people think of me? How do they see me? And do I measure up to their expectations? And it's this sort of very inwardly focused obsession with my image and do I measure up? And so humility is not thinking down about yourself. It's not like trying to downgrade yourself in your own mind. It's really just giving up all of that concern for what people think of you and how you stack up to their expectations, and just living in who you are and where you are. So, Phil, to make this practical, proud insecurity is sort of the fake it till you make it approach of, you ask me a question and I don't really know the answer, but I'm going to try to sound really smart and make something up and hope that you buy it and we can move on as quickly as possible, right? That's that proud insecurity that frankly can get us in a lot of trouble sometimes when we're just trying to maintain that image. Humble confidence, on the other hand, would say, that's a great question and I don't know the answer to that, but here's some ideas that I have, and maybe here's an approach that I would take to go figure that out. And I'm confident that if we work together and apply ourselves, we can get the answer to that. And I came to this place personally that I realized that I can derive my confidence not from everything I know and all the experience I have and this, expertise, but I can actually draw confidence from my ability to learn. That I don't have to have the answer if I'm confident I can go get the answer. And I don't have to have done the thing I'm doing a million times before to feel confident in it. If I can look back on my life and say, everything I've ever done, at some point I did it for the first time and I figured it out. And so I can do this the same way. I might make some mistakes. There'll be some learning involved. I may have a setback or two, but I'm confident that I can figure this out and I don't have to pretend I already have it figured out in order to move forward and be that explorer and step into it. So that's really the key to humble confidence, is just being honest with yourself and with others about where you are, what you know, the experiences you have, and not feeling like you have to fake it till you make it. But you can just stand in confidence and this is where I am right in this moment, but this is not where I'm going to be forever.
Yeah. Well, you say in the book that there's 3 big words there that the people that are humbly confident are. I don't know.
No.
But I would
Yes.
also add 5, I can figure it out.
Yes.
If you can say those to yourself, you can really overcome a lot of that. So I
Yeah.
really dig that, Kris. That's a lot of good stuff there. Got one more question for you here, but before I ask that question, I want to encourage folks, after you're done listening to this, get to know Kris Kelso more. Go to overcomingtheimposter.com. Get a free chapter of his book. It's the chapter on tour guides and explorers. It's a great chapter, super meaty, not like many authors who give away their first introductory table of contents and a couple pages about what the book's about. This is some meat. So with that, Kris, if you were going to give us one place where we could start, on Overcoming the Imposter, what would that be?
Boy, there's a lot of things you can do, but one thing that is a symptom of imposter syndrome that a lot of people find themselves falling into is the inability to accept a compliment at face value. And so what happens is, someone says something nice to us. Hey, I saw you on that podcast and it was great. And I enjoyed hearing you talk. And what we tend to do, many of us, is to downplay that comment by making a joke or with some sarcasm, or we deflect it and try to push it to something else or change the subject. And for instance, I have a friend who's a really great writer. And I mean, he's sold millions and millions of books that he's written. And yet when someone compliments his writing, he has this standard line that goes something like, "Oh, you and my mom must have been my 2 readers on that book." So why do we do that? We take a gift that someone has given us, a compliment, a gracious thought about our work. We take that gift and we say, it's not that important to me. Have you ever thought about the fact that when someone pays you a compliment and you deflect it or downplay it or make a joke, you're actually insulting that person. You're taking that gift and saying, I don't really want it. Or, yeah, I know you put a lot into this, but it's not that valuable to me. So what if we all just agreed to stop doing that? So the next time someone pays you a compliment and you start to have that temptation to deflect it or make a joke, here's what I want to recommend you do. Plant your feet, look them in the eye, smile, and just say, thank you. I worked really hard on that, and it's so nice to know that my work is appreciated. No sarcasm, no downplaying, don't deflect it, just be appreciative. Just receive the gift and honor the giver of that gift. And over time, what'll happen is you'll start to accept those compliments and believe the praise that people are making observations about you, and your brain doesn't want to accept those things as real. Just accept them, internalize them, own them, and most of all, honor the giver of the gift. Allow them the joy of seeing you accept that compliment as it was meant. And that's going to help with wrestling with imposter syndrome.
Wow. That's awesome. That's a great way to take us home, Kris. Well, friends, get to know Kris Kelso. Get a copy of Overcoming the Imposter. Go to kriskelso.com or Overcoming the Imposter and start receiving the gifts. Start respecting the giver and start respecting yourselves, friend, because the fact that you have imposter syndrome means you're probably already good enough, because people who suck don't have imposter syndrome. Thanks, Kris.
That's right. Thanks, Phil. I enjoyed this very much.
Me too.